Ladies and gentlemen, to make the history of the great conspiracy both clear and convincing, we need 100 volumes of 1,000 pages each. And we hope that those scholarly volumes will all be written in due course as a guide and a warning to future generations. But at present we have a more immediate and more urgent task. We want to give you simply an outline of the progress of this organized evil force from its beginning up to the present time. The aim of the conspirators always has been and still is to impose the brutal tyranny of their rule over the whole human race. Today, they are at last within striking distance of that ultimate goal. And we agree with the Honorable J. Edgar Hoover, who stated in the April 1961 FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin that the way to fight it, communism, is to study it, understand it, and discover what can be done about it. We think that the only way to stop the communists is to create sufficient understanding soon enough among enough people as to what is really taking place all around us. So let's do our best within the limits that are practicable for this occasion to review the whole fantastic story step by step. A, the early background. Step 1, we must hunt the first steps largely in the shadows rather than in the substance of history, for the conspiracy is deep-rooted. 200 years ago, or during the last half of the 18th century, there were in Europe many secret societies with grandiose dreams of overthrowing all existing human institutions and of rising out of the resulting chaos as the all-powerful rulers of a new order of civilization. Of these groups, the Illuminati, founded in Bavaria by Adam Weishaupt on May 1, 1776, was undoubtedly the most important. Step number 2. By 1789, the Illuminati were already strong enough to have had a great deal to do with planning and precipitating the Holocaust known as the French Revolution. In that upheaval, we find many elements of communist strategy and purpose with which we are familiar today. One was the ruthless undermining of rulers and governments in order to destroy them. Another was the destruction of all religion by substituting the worship of reason in its place. You will remember that the revolutionaries erected in Paris a statue to the goddess of reason as a symbol of this change. A third element was the fomenting by a few professional agitators of mob action made to appear as a spontaneous uprising of the people. A fourth was the massive use of terror to silence all opposition. A fifth was the use of the manufactured smear to destroy the enemies of the revolution or its temporary leaders. And all of these objectives and methods, which sound like rehearsals for what is happening throughout the world today, had either been specifically set forth by Weishaupt for his Order of Illuminati or were the practical applications of his program. 3. By 1795, the French Revolution had run its horrible course, and there was a gradual return even in France to traditional beliefs, values, and institutions. Although it led to the Napoleonic Wars, which for the next 20 years devastated so much of Europe, this revolutionary fire in France had failed to set off a continent-wide social conflagration as the Illuminati and similar groups had hoped and planned. And henceforth, the Illuminati observed even more closely than before the original Weishaupt instruction that the very existence of the order should be denied and kept secret at all costs. But the fact that the Illuminati were active at the end of the 18th century with a growing reach and influence in many countries is clearly proved in the detailed histories of Robison and the Abbé Barruel. And the short-lived Babeuf conspiracy reveals that other groups, though possibly allied or subsidiary to the Illuminati, were working for the same totally destructive purposes. 4. During the 19th century, some of these secret societies and subversive groups appear to have grown and coalesced into the communist conspiracy as we know it today. However hidden the controlling nerve centers may have been, by 1848, some of the activities and even organizational structures of the conspiracy were becoming visible. The first important declaration of purposes, using the name of communism as we understand the word today, was issued by Karl Marx in 1848. Communist plotting was at work to some extent in the numerous uprisings of that year, 1848, as it has been in almost all insurrections and wars involving European nations since that time. 5. But the communist movement is only a tool of the total conspiracy. As secret as the communist activities and organizations generally appear, they are part of an open book compared to the secrecy enveloping some higher degree of this diabolic force. The extrinsic evidence is strong and convincing that by the beginning of the 20th century, there had evolved an inner core of conspiratorial power able to direct and control subversive activities which were worldwide in their reach, incredibly cunning and ruthless in their nature, and brilliantly far-sighted and patient in their strategy. Whether or not this increasingly all-powerful hidden command was due to an unbroken continuation of Weishaupt's Illuminati, or was a distillation from the leadership of this and other groups, we do not know. Some of them may never have been communists, while others were. To avoid as much dispute as possible, therefore, let's call this ruling clique simply the insiders. But we do need some such term for both clarity and convenience. And it should be recognized that always pushing and promoting each other into higher positions on every road to power and wealth and fame has been a vital part of the strategy of this fraternity from the beginning, and of the motivation of its members at any given time. The goal for each generation of conspirators, the tie that bound them together, lay in what this self-perpetuating body was to become. But the contemporary reward and satisfaction was in the becoming. 6. For more than 100 years now, the conspiracy had pushed on steadily along many avenues, all leading to the one goal of world rule. During the last half of the 19th century, the insiders were using the communists, the anarchists, the socialists of various hues and kinds, and dozens of other groups to promote their purposes. Many of these groups were largely unconscious of how they were being spurred on and guided by a few clever insiders. While under the guise of humanitarianism and in the pretended promotion of freedom and equality and brotherhood, these insiders and the gullible idealists who served as their dupes were busily undermining the very beliefs and institutions which made the 19th century a high watermark of such civilization as man has laboriously achieved. One broad avenue down which these conspiratorial forces advanced was known as progressive legislation. The very same collectivist theories and demagogic pretenses which had destroyed earlier civilizations were now paraded forth in the disguise of new and modern concepts. What Pisistratus had done in Athens in the 6th century BC, with the leverage of his vaunted concern for the working classes,